Since U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on Canada, many Canadians have felt anxious about what's going to happen next. But it's been all hands on deck from coast to coast. Manitoba Premier Wob Canoe is urging people to buy local.
Well, 3, 2, 1. Ta-da! Support Manitoba, buy local. So this is a new initiative that our government is launching to really highlight the great local businesses that we have in every corner of this province. You can head to the website, manitoba.ca/buy local. Tons of resources. People have been asking those questions, about whether it's food or booze. I think has been a very popular topic this past week.
And beyond buying local, even hockey fans in Canadian cities are expressing their frustration with the U.S. going as far as to boo the American anthem that is ritually played before NHL games. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in a press briefing that Canada is more aligned and united than ever, and that the response from Canadians to tariffs has been inspiring.
The one thing that has shone through over the past few days is Canadians being there for their neighbors, for their friends, looking to buy Canadian goods, looking to find Canadian suppliers, looking to be there to support communities right across the country through these challenging times. That is the very best of Canada. We pull together when we're faced with challenges, and that's what we've seen from coast to coast to coast. We are more aligned than ever. We are more united than ever.
I'm now joined by Brendan Caldwell, director of Caldwell Securities Ltd, to discuss how Canada has grown more united in the wake of Trump's tariffs. Brendan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Your previews had me laughing. I don't know that we're more united than ever. We have overcome some bigger challenges as a nation than the posturing of the current president, and we'll come to it, I'm sure. But you'll notice that coast to coast to coast, and yet buying local means buying Manitoba. I don't know what, and he mentioned alcohol in particular. I don't know what the vineyards of Portage la Prairie are like, but it may be challenging to get some things as locally as the Premier of Manitoba would like.
Well, with the talks of tariffs and tensions between Canada and the United States, it's argued that people have been more inspired to be more patriotic. Many Canadians are wanting to shop and buy more local and travel locally. So do you think you could unpack actually what's happening here? And what do you think that this means for Canada?
So I think there's really two questions there. What is it ultimately going to mean, and what's the best reaction?
Yep.
I think there's really two reactions one can have, and I don't know whether one of them's right. One can either actually start a trade war, which I don't think is going to be helpful, because I do think much of what the president is talking about is posturing. No, don't get me wrong. He does wish to see if there's a way he can have tariffs replace income tax, and he would like to show that this is how tough he is on his friends. Just imagine what he'll do to his enemies. But so that's one way. The other way is to be suppliant and keel over and do whatever the president wants, as though he's running our nation yet. But I think the third way that nobody's really thought of trying is just take the president seriously, but not overreact. It is not likely that there will be 25% across the board tariffs, because it doesn't make sense for either country. And ultimately, the president's about getting a deal done. As for being patriotic, yes, but I don't think gestures like booing the national anthem are nearly as good as working on ways that we can actually be united in reality more than in just words.
And what role do interprovincial trade barriers play in all of this, and how might cutting them affect us?
And I think there you go. That's the rub. So on the one hand, you've got the prime minister saying we're united as a nation. On the other hand, the premier of Manitoba and the other premiers talking about just their own provinces. understandable as everybody's talking their own position, indeed their own jurisdiction. But there are barriers to moving goods, services, qualified people between countries, and that's problematic because I mean, if you think of the European Union, it's I don't know, approaching 300 million people, and they can move goods and services freely around between countries, and you can move people freely around between countries. Now, it's a little harder to go from Copenhagen to Corfu to practice as a dentist, uh, but I guess say maybe the same in both languages. But in Canada, it's pretty hard as a professional to move between provinces. There are little provincial, both unions and or professional societies that do put up barriers. And then just even the movement of goods. So we need to be united as a nation. To borrow from one of the fathers of the American Revolution, I think Ben Franklin, if we do not hang together, we shall all surely hang separately.
Now, many Canadians are boycotting travel to the US. How do you think that this will affect the travel and tourism industries?
It Every industry can adapt to any change. One single shock, fewer Canadians going to the US. The trouble is, where else does one go? Bermuda is a tiny island. The Bahamas scarcely bigger. So we could go to other places, but so many people have cottages or not cottages, winter homes in Florida or Arizona or even California. That's all. That's not. It's like the trade relationship in general. The work of decades, generations, even centuries of union are not going to be undone by a few speeches and um, gestures. Really, what we need to do as a country is actually take serious measures and think seriously about how our relation is with the United States and our relation to the rest of the world. If our biggest export is energy, and our nearest neighbor doesn't want our energy or says they don't want our energy, then all right, we need to look for other markets. Yes, we are a decade behind. And so we need to get on it post haste, but we will adapt, and so will the travel market in the US adapt. So, Canada, maybe we're not as united as we've been ever, to dial down the Prime Minister's hyperbole, but maybe we're the most united we've been, say, since the last 10 years.
Well, and to stay on the topic of traveling, how can we make domestic travel in Canada more accessible?
Well, we could be warmer in the winter than we are now. Uh, so yeah, the fact is, uh, Al Gore, an inconvenient truth, and the climate emergency, which I'm resisting not doing the air quotes on, notwithstanding, Canada is still going to be a very cold place for a while. So it is a tough one to imagine. Like when we want to travel in the winter, we need to go south. Now, in the summertime, actually the biggest month for the travel industry in Canada is the third calendar quarter, the one from June, July, August, September, is the biggest quarter. So possibly having greater domestic competition in plane travel. I mean, the U.S. It's all about moving around the U.S. Some large majority of Americans don't even have passports; they don't need to. You want to ski, you go to Vermont. You want to get sun, you go to Florida. You don't have to leave the U.S. So making it easier to travel around. Canada would be one way of doing it. So opening up our airline space to greater competition rather than the duopoly or oligopolies that seem to rule of every industry in this country could be a way.
Now, I want to talk about the hockey and the fans booing. So Bill Blair came out after that and said that it's not that Canada's angry, it's that Canada's disappointed. Kind of like what your parents said. I'm not mad, just disappointed. um, so do you think that the United States and Canada's relationship will ever go back to normal if these tariffs do happen?
Well, for it could be a long time. It could be a very long time. Trade relationships take, as I said earlier, years, decades, even centuries to build up. The last time we were at the peak global trade, prior to our lifetimes, was actually 1914, and then it all came apart pretty quickly. So global trade relations takes a long time to build up, but they can be undone pretty quickly. And then it takes generations to build them back up again. So in answer to your question, maybe not.
Now, we do just have under a minute, but do you think these movements will affect the markets?
Weirdly, they haven't. I think there's a few other factors going on in the markets, but you have a combination of higher interest rates, the uh, the um, the advent of international competition in the AI market, which America thought had dominated, and then these Trump tariffs, for want of a better term, along with the ongoing global conflicts. You got a lot of stuff going on, and the market's holding in there very well. There is an old expression: bull markets ignore bad news. And that may be where we are, or maybe it'll take one more shock to actually pull the market down.